Hey marketers, this is the Girls in Marketing podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We are so excited to get started with the episodes. Just before we do, we want to give you a little introduction to who we are and what we do. Girls in Marketing is an e-learning platform and online community. We are on a mission to bridge the digital skills gap and equalise gender seniority in marketing. Right, that's enough chat. Let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome back to the Girls in Marketing podcast. Today we are back with another snack episode. We're going to be chatting all about greenwashing in marketing. Now this is something that is somewhat of a hot topic amongst us as people and also in the industry as well. It's something that a lot of people I think talk about but people don't really understand, or maybe they do, but it's just like a massive grey area. I think it's one of those things where we're not really sure if companies are greenwashing, if they're not, when you work in marketing, you know, kind of just everything. So I want to open up the floor to everyone today around greenwashing. What do we think of it? And yeah, what's everyone's thoughts on like brands, greenwashing, but specifically maybe more in general and then also in marketing as well?
Yeah, I think marketing plays quite a big role in greenwashing for a brand, really, doesn't it? Because I guess it's like, obviously I'm not saying that the marketers necessarily are the ones who make the decision to express a brand in a certain way. And, you know, if marketers within an organisation or working for a brand are told, like, this is what we want to say about our business, like, it's not necessarily their choice. But I do think that a lot of how greenwashing is portrayed to consumers is through the marketing of a product or a brand. And I guess greenwashing is it's when, you know, a product or a brand or whatever it is kind of made to seem like it's more sustainable, more ethically created, more ethically sourced than it actually is, in a way that's either like explicitly saying, you know, lying and saying it's this sustainable or it's this ethical or whatever when it's not, or in a way that's a little bit more kind of deceptive and in like a way that like alludes to certain things without giving any concrete facts, but just kind of like puts in the consumer's mind that it is more sustainable than it actually is. So yeah, I think the two kind of come together, don't they? Like marketers, you know, whether, you know, intentionally or not, like have a role to play in kind of like, you know, the way that a brand is portrayed and its values and everything like that. Like it's a big part of working in marketing, isn't it? So yeah, I think it's a difficult one. And I think that, you know, if you work for an organisation that wants to do that, I guess you're in a bit of a tricky position as a marketer, aren't you, really? Because it's sort of like, you know, how much say do you actually have about the way that this is done? And if you don't agree with it personally, like how much of a position are you in to disagree with actually doing that on behalf of a brand? It's quite hard. And I think definitely, you know, a little bit later on in the episode, like we definitely want to talk about some ways that, you know, as a brand, you can minimize your involvement or minimize like how much you greenwash your products and how you can avoid kind of misleading consumers and making things seem more sustainable than they are. But yeah, I think it is a big thing and it's really hard to notice, definitely.
What are your thoughts as the vegans of the group? What are your thoughts on it? I feel like obviously veganism and greenwashing aren't necessarily the same thing, but they do overlap quite a lot.
Ballpark.
Yeah, same ballpark. What are both of your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because greenwashing, we obviously see it from kind of high street brands that aren't anything to do with the sustainability movement, but also I notice it like within the sustainability movement as well. So kind of like vegan sustainable brands who are genuinely creating change are also sometimes accused of greenwashing, even if they're doing things behind the scenes that you might not realize. An example that I'm thinking of is like a vegan drinks company, this is real, who received investment from a firm who that firm also invested in deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. So they're a big vegan company doing important things, but actually they received so much heat from vegans and activists and that community, even though it's within that industry and they're doing good, actually they weren't happy about that. So it's really interesting how greenwashing, it differs. But
Yeah.
like, it can even happen to brands who are claiming to be sustainable and who are actually sustainable as well, doing good. It kind of affects everyone in a weird way.
Yeah, that's interesting though, because was that, I don't know whether that was like a smaller company or something, because I know Go on, sorry.
Yeah, no, it was a big, it's a big vegan brand, and you'd buy them in your supermarket. So it's not kind of a small business who are being accused of it. It's kind of like, big brands.
But didn't you say that was the point of it?
And
I remember you talking about it because you've done some stuff on it, like your dissertation and that. And, I know, but you said that the reason that they did that was to kind of make a point that they can invest in companies that obviously are doing deforestation or whatever, but also in vegan brands. So maybe that's like going against the grain, because it's almost with the greenwashing, it's like, is it, obviously when it genuinely is greenwashing, it's not good, but sometimes is it certain brands kind of take on being sustainable?
Exactly,
are they actually trying?
Because we also obviously see like big influencer collaborations as well with like high impact influencers and not so sustainable brands. And a lot of people look at that and think, oh God, that's horrendous. Like that is so unethical. But actually, is it them trying to say, okay, well, we're going to get this high impact influencer because they have the reach to spread this message? And I kind of get it from that standpoint. But then if that brand isn't doing it fundamentally behind closed doors, then that's where the issue lies, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's also interesting as well. I think it depends on what the brand is, because like you said with the vegan brand, that it came out that, you know, they talk about everything that they do for the environment and stuff, and then it came out that there was like investment from this company or whatever. I think sometimes as well, the brands that are kind of hardest hit by like the people giving them like grief for that sort of thing are the ones that are like doing the most. It's always the way, isn't it? It's like, I mean, as somebody who eats plant-based, like I'm much more likely to be questioned on what I eat on my diet and like be picked apart by people than someone who's not, just because I think sometimes people just kind of want to, not that they want to do it intentionally, but I think like anyone or any brand that is doing good, people almost think that's too good to be true. So they want to catch you out at times, I suppose. But it's interesting that, you know, like you say, it can be anything from, you know, who their investors are to where they source their products to how much they pay their workers and things like that. And I think it's also brands that have like different product ranges that are so varied, and like it might be a brand that is like a household name that we all kind of know, just like you just kind of know that it's not particularly sustainable, and you've heard things about how they don't necessarily pay their production workers well or whatever it might be. And then they bring out this line that's like super sustainable line, and their packaging's all like green and it's all like
brown,
trees everywhere and like plant
recycled packaging.
And you know the same people who have like boxed up that packaging are like being paid nothing. And it's just,
and then I think that's also when it's sort of like you can't, it's that hypocrisy where it's sort of like, it's fine to bring out this one product line that you're claiming to be really sustainable, but you can't be like sustainable in like what, like small segments of your company and then like use that to kind of like brush over everything else. You can't really just kind of mask other stuff with it.
And often it's them companies that come out with the one sustainable line, or it's the one, I don't know, they do like some sustainable packaging for like however long of a period of time, and it's like sometimes it's them companies that don't get questioned more than the vegan companies who are like doing good and like there is evidence for it, and it's just like, well, are you actually? But it's like, no,
strange that isn't
it's so weird.
And the idea in itself of it makes me laugh, because the idea in itself of a brand coming out with a line especially to be sustainable is just unsustainable in itself.
Exactly.
The idea of creating one-off like lines and collections is just, it doesn't work like that.
It's the opposite,
That's the very notion of it. So it does make me laugh when people come out with like, this is our sustainable line. It's like, well, how much does that cost?
And it's basically
you
also
resources?
then saying this is our sustainable line, which is emphasising that the rest of our stuff's the non-sustainable line. So it's like you're kind of going like in the face of it. But I'd be interested, Liv, from your perspective, obviously coming from like a psychology background, I think as a consumer, a lot of the really kind of subtle kind of deceptions around greenwashing are like to do with things like what we mentioned about colours, like using green, using certain types of like label materials and things like that. As a consumer, I think it's really easy to kind of see that and be like, that must be like really sustainable, or it must be organic, or it must be whatever. Like what's like, how much of an influence do you think, obviously I'm not saying you're an expert, but what do you think that influence has on consumers?
No, I think genuinely colour does impact like psychology. Like I think that kind of green, brown, like earthy, those earthy colours are always going to be related to sustainability. So when you kind of see like a brand that has, you know, a brown label and it says like, you know, it could say 1% recycled material, but because it's brown, you see it and you go, oh. And then maybe when you read it, you think, oh, it's only 1%. But if they're saying 100% recycled materials, and then it has like a little star next to it, like an asterisk, and then on the back it says, like, JK, just messing, like, it's not really, like, you might not actually even see that, but you're drawn to those, you know, when you go into like a high street retailer and they've got like, you know, a product line, and at the top it has like the brown and it says like new sustainable line, you're like, oh, like I'll walk over there because it's the colours, and it genuinely is. And I think that is something, you know, those earthy colours relate to sustainability, so you're always gonna think about that when you see them.
Yeah. I think it's funny what you said about percentages as well, because like we said before, it's kind of like, for a brand, how do you determine sustainability? Like, you could think, yeah, we've done this really sustainably, and that might be because you've managed to create a product more sustainably than you did previously, and you found a more sustainable way. But like, what's the standard? Like, and how do you ensure that your use of percentages isn't deceptive to consumers? Because as a consumer, like, what are we like marking these percentages against? Like, what do we personally find an acceptable level of recycled materials in a product? Like, we don't really know. So I think like a lot of the time it's brands using numbers, figures, percentages to their advantage to go, oh, a consumer would think 75% is probably quite good. Like, you know, let's just throw that in there. And like, it's actually nuanced by all of these other, like, as you say, asterisks, like fine print, but they don't need to know that. They see that number and go, yeah, that's great. So I think as a brand or as a marketer, I think something that you can definitely do to try and, you know, prevent yourself from kind of getting into this kind of space of like greenwashing, if that's something that is relevant for your business, is just trying to really think about the numbers and things that you use to like quantify, you know, the sustainability of your products. Like, what does it actually mean? Like, is there any sort of standard that you're comparing it to? And are you, when you actually think about it, kind of deceiving or misleading the consumers by using those numbers? Like, are you using them in an honest way?
Yeah, it is really interesting. I learned about this, not to get too English language on everyone, but there's this thing called the art of rhetoric, which is essentially like persuasive devices you can use. And we see it all the time in marketing copy. And what you're talking about is called logos, logos is Latin, logistic. And people will just pack copy full of facts and statistics to persuade people via science, and there are no markers for that. So it is really interesting to see brands use that technique, and I always pick up on it because it's just like a device that I learn, and I just always see it. So it is definitely something to look out for. And as a marketer, like you say, make sure that it is honest in some way in your copy.
I think it's so difficult though, because we obviously have a lot of people in our community that work for a variety of brands. Some that maybe are involved in greenwashing, some that maybe aren't. But as a marketer, it's so difficult, because what if you're in the position, and there may be people right now that are in that position where they have to market a product or a new line or whatever, a service or whatever that isn't sustainable, and they're being told by senior management to do a certain thing, to add these percentages, to do all these different things. What happens then? I think that's always something that maybe we need to kind of talk about here, is as a marketer, if you're at kind of the bottom of the, you know, the pile, if you will, you're the one who's just doing the marketing for someone, you're not in a position enough where you can say, I don't really agree with the fact that we're releasing this line of unsustainable products, but we're calling it 100% recycled materials. But you're the one who has to do the copy. You're the one who has to do the social media. Because I think there will be a lot of people in that position. And for me, it's just like making sure that, I mean, we could go into the spiel of making sure you only work for a company that aligns with your values. But sometimes it's like this is a job.
It's not an option for everyone.
It's not an option.
No, I definitely think that is, you know, that's a privileged thing to be able to do, isn't it? 100%. And I think, you know, it's a question of like personal morals and like how much it conflicts with you. And I totally agree. Like, there will be times when there probably will be things that you'll have to do or say that you maybe don't fully agree with. And if you're in a position to kind of take a stand and say, actually, I don't want to do that, and if it means I have to go and find a job elsewhere, and you're in a position to do that, then fine. And it's all kind of relative, isn't it? It's all personal, and how much it really kind of does conflict with your own views and stuff like that. But yeah, it's hard because not everybody is in a position to say, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave because I don't agree with you, but I've got nothing else to go to.
Yeah.
It is really hard, and brands can have that kind of hold on people in that sense, can't they?
Yeah. I'd just probably say to people, consider when you take a job what you might have to do, like within the position. You know, if you are going to work for maybe a retail brand or a fast fashion brand or something like that, where possibly you will have to do that, you need to think, okay, I need to be willing to do this. Or if you're not, then maybe holding off. Again, maybe a more privileged position. But if that is something that bothers you, greenwashing, I mean, unless you are in that position where you can stop it. And there are scenarios where you can do that. You could say, okay, maybe let's like try this or try this angle instead of this. Sometimes there's a way to go about it that's more moral, even though it might not be sustainable. It could be like maybe more moral than kind of misleading. So I think there's ways to do it, but just considering where you are working and kind of the content that you're putting out there is always a really interesting one. We partnered, Girls in Marketing partnered with the Sustainable Marketer Manifesto, which is essentially something that they are starting a bit of a movement, and they're saying sign this, not necessarily a petition, just kind of like, I don't know what the word for
Manifesto.
Yeah, that's
like a commitment,
correct.
isn't it?
And it's really interesting, actually. Like, if you want to see it, go and check it out. It's called the Sustainability Marketer Manifesto. And essentially, they're kind of making sure that people are committing themselves to only marketing sustainably. And it's really cool, and what they're doing is great. And I think that greenwashing comes into it a lot because as marketers, they say, and I agree, we have the responsibility of, like, when we're pushing products or pushing services or new lines or whatever, we're the marketers. We're the ones who are reaching hundreds, thousands of people. How do we actually do the marketing? And we need to take a stance as marketers to say, actually, no, like, we shouldn't be doing it this way. Obviously, it does depend on everyone's scenario, but if you have the confidence to do it and you have the means to do so, I would say that that's a good way to go.
Definitely. And I think that if you are working for an organisation, you feel like sometimes you are in a position where you feel like you're finding it hard to get out of, you know, greenwashing products or making them seem more sustainable than they are, then a few things that you can do is, like I've said, try and be as honest as possible in the way that you use any figures and statistics, so that you're trying as best as possible not to be deceptive, not to kind of make things seem better than they are. Don't word things in a way that are kind of confusing or can be misleading. Like, just take away the fluff around stuff, and I guess just be as concise as possible, and don't leave the consumer feeling like, wait, so are they sustainable or are they not? And like, how are they sustainable again? They're saying they are, but I don't get it. Like, be honest. And people genuinely appreciate truth. Like, consumers like truth from brands.
Yeah.
And if you're not sustainable, you don't necessarily have to put on your packaging really unsustainable, terrible packaging, but you don't have to claim that you are if you're not. Like, if you are, great, but if you're not, trying to say that you are can actually have a negative effect if people see through it.
Yeah. And part of the beauty of, like, being in marketing and, like, being able to write copy in that way is also to, like you say, to be able to tell the truth, but in a way that makes people feel like they can trust you. And it's about delivering, not necessarily, you can't always deliver good news. You can't, for example, any kind of sustainability reports, that it won't always be good, but there's a way to write this copy that makes it seem good.
Yeah, exactly.
And to tell people the truth in an honest,
acknowledging
in an honest way.
where kind of your downfalls are currently, but what you are doing as a company to achieve the things that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Like, honesty about knowing what your kind of like flaws are and how you're addressing them is so much better for a consumer than just trying to cover them with like deceit.
Yeah.
Really.
And that will be the fun of it, of the where the creative element comes in to try and craft something that sounds, you know, good.
Yeah, I think a brand that's done that quite recently actually is Tala by Grace Beverly. So she is obviously, she's vegan and she kind of lives quite a sustainable life, and she, I don't know it ins and outs of her life, but as far as I'm aware,
Amy does.
And she said, openly admitted, and she said Tala's not the most sustainable. She actually said Tala, the gym wear brand, for anyone who isn't aware, isn't as sustainable as she would want it to be in an ideal world, but materials are expensive and we want this to be an affordable product, and therefore for it to be affordable the materials have to be cheaper, and obviously it doesn't kind of add up. And she's recently been doing kind of some stories on it, and like I'm not sure if she's a YouTube video or something, but it's like a long form piece of content somewhere. Can't remember where I've seen it, but it was basically just addressing what they're actually doing to achieve that sustainability element. But they're not lying. Like, she's not saying we are sustainable. She's saying we do the best that we can with the money that we've got for our market, but we could be better. And I think it's that, again, that buzzword of authenticity. She's saying, look, like, we could be better, but we're not quite where we are. And that, I think that's what
I think that's really powerful. And I think that's what I'm missing from the big high street brands. That's what I'm missing from fast fashion companies
There's
and
just silence,
massive
no
supermarkets and manufacturing. That's what I'm missing. It's just like, you're either sustainable or you're silent. And I think there is a way for these massive companies to say, hey, it's not all good, but we're trying to do this and please help us, kind of thing, and support us in that.
Yeah, but I wonder if she feels more confident in saying that, because I'm guessing she's saying that on her own, like, personal like socials and stuff. And I'm guessing if, like, I guess like the CEOs of these massive companies that aren't necessarily really sustainable, I guess if they said on their own, like, socials, like, but
I think maybe the slight difference with Tala and with Grace Beverley is kind of how that business is formed, and it really did form and like grow to the size that it is off the back of Grace's own following. So like, whereas certain CEOs are so far removed from the organisation that if they said it, people might not care or see it. Like Grace Beverley and like Tala are like so closely intertwined. Like everything she does is the brand of Tala or Shreddy or whatever it is, and like she lives and breathes them, and like her personal brand is that brand as well. So I guess it's quite similar, isn't it? But I think that like also she's acknowledged that like it isn't as sustainable as it could be, but like you said, Liv, it's as sustainable as it can be at the moment to make it affordable, because it's either, and it's like she's wanting to bridge the gap between sustainability being completely unaffordable and like the only options being very expensive sustainable products or absolutely really accessible and like inexpensive unsustainable products. So it's trying to find that middle ground, isn't it? And I'm sure that, you know, like she said, she's facing issues navigating it, but she's honest.
Yeah, and I think it is that element, Kira, like what you said, because she's the CEO, or well, the kind of founder of it and the person who like looks after it, essentially, she has the power to do that. And maybe it's kind of that element of it's time for these CEOs or these people in higher up positions to make a stand, because people on the ground might not be able to. You know, as marketers, we can only do what we can, whether it's crafting copy in a certain way or creating a caption a different way maybe than you would before. But actually, it's the people with the kind of power that should maybe be making a change if possible, because it's saying, okay, you know, we need to be more sustainable. We've done this, we've done that, and brands have done it and people respect them for it. You know, Innocent is another one. Like they've said before, we do all these things for sustainability, but we're not like completely sustainable. Like we need to be better. And I think it's just people respect that from brands to say, you know, we could do better. But I just think personally, you can see through it when it's a brand who is greenwashing versus a brand that is being honest and open and transparent.
Definitely.
Right, that marks the end of another great episode. We really hope you enjoyed tuning in today. And if you did, please share with your friends, rate us on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, and watch the video version on YouTube. We've got so many exciting things coming, so we really love for you to get involved. See you soon.